Hello. Happy Wednesday. If it's Wednesday in your corner of the world, and good evening if you're on the East Coast, Eastern Standard Time. So, I am telling you, this one, Masterson, we've been following this for a long time. First time it kind of hit, I believe, social media and articles and was a buzz through Hollywood articles and things was late 2016. 2017. Only rumors, things like that. Yo, hey, hi. Good to see you, quiz. Yes, it's evening in Central too. It's evening in several places, but I don't have 3 years to like say all the time zones. Plus, like I'll admit, I don't remember them all, not very well. Um, I know my usuals like Eastern and Central, and I get the UK down. I know how far that is, and I'm pretty good with Australian and New Zealand. Well, everything else, I'm kind of out. I think Mountain Time is that like 2 hours, 2 hours earlier than us. Oh, Pacific Time too. That's like three. So, but anyway, in regards to Masterson, the trial, it started full fledged with the jury and everything on Monday. And I decided only to do recaps a couple of times during the week. I wanted to do two this week because the opening statements were pretty profound into how this trial is going to be a bit different. Um, in our last review, we talked about some of the differences that Mueller, Cohen, Hawley, even Judge Olmedo had laid out things would be. It's already starting to be quite a thing. Okay. As you know, it's not live. There's no audio or video recording. And currently, I haven't even seen court sketch artists released images yet. If anyone does, please link me, direct me. I've been searching for the last 2 days. I haven't seen anything come out. But that doesn't mean that we don't get really good reporting about what's going on, because again, Tony Ortega is the journalist allowed in the courtroom, and he's been actually providing a pretty good blow by blow for all journalists, article writers, and YouTubers out there. He puts his content under the underground bunker. He releases his YouTube videos, and his there's no arguing with his information. If he gets anything wrong, like he did in regards to Claire Headley's dad, he just misspoke and said it was her dad instead of her stepfather, and he clearly went right ahead and corrected it immediately in several places. um Yes, he follows Scientology, and some may think that he's a bit biased, and I think he's biased for a really good reason. He's been following it for a long time. He follows a lot of the law cases, but when it comes to jotting down the facts about who said what and who did what, he's not biased at all. He gives them both. Does he make a little wingy joke here and there at the expense of his personal belief? Sure, he does. But don't we all? I mean, you could accuse me of that right here, right now. And I would gladly admit it, because if I can't make a jab at what I honestly believe and see to be like, hypocrisy or just ridiculousness, I mean, we all look at things that way. And I don't think he's pretending to be any other way. He's not out there on a standing on a statue stand and saying, "Hey, I am totally pious and unbiased." He's not doing that. He's pretty clear where he's coming from at all times. And those of you that follow on YouTube and things like that, the reporting that he does. And some of the people that I've had on my channel, and he's doing the same thing with Chris Shelton and Aaron and tons of people constantly. He knows all of the people. Hey, Sean, welcome. Hey, mm, I'm glad. I'm glad. Okay, so opening statements. They were a little different. Okay, there wasn't a lot of grandstanding. Um, but I will have to tell you that Judge Almeida had a little bit of a problem with some of it. Well, let's start. Of course, prosecution goes first, and as I let that would be D.A. Mueller. Reinhold Mueller. He ran the prosecution in the first trial, and he's going to do it again in the second. Philip Cohen will be for the defense. He will do the opening statement for the defense. However, it seems that new chair Sean Hawley, who's been part of the defense all along, but because of the baseball trial prior. She could make it to the first one. And Karen Goldstein was there filling in. Well, Sean Hawley's here and present at this time. And let me tell you how present she was. Because before we even got to anything on Monday, first thing, Sean Hawley had something to say. Because, well, the courtroom was full, and Danny Masterson had his wife there, and his brothers, and his mother, and his friend, and his wife's sister Mackenzie was there. He had a good full side over there, for him. And there were some several people there to support the accusers. Okay, and one of those people was the friend of Jane Doe 1, was Leah Remini. And well, Sean Hawley took great exception to this. She objected to her even being in the courtroom. She tried to say that she was going to be a witness, and that she shouldn't be able to hear anything anybody's saying because she'll be out there talking about it. Well, yeah, Leah Remini would be out there talking about it. She talks about Scientology a lot. And it seems like the sheer mention of her name or just looking at her causes them a bit of a problem. Because Sean really put herself out on a limb because, Leah Remini is not on a witness list. Judge Olmedo pushed back and said, you can use her as an impeachment witness. She asked D.A. Mueller while she was there, is she a support person for any of the accusers or any of the victims? And he said yes. He believes she's friends with Jane Doe 1. And there you go. Judge Almeida says she can stay. I will ask her not to talk about the proceedings. You could talk about like what happened to her, and she did. She went to Twitter and said, "Oh, by the way, Sean Hawley tried to do this." Okay, she was out there on Twitter going, "I'm not a witness. This is how Scientology operates. If you think they're not motivated in this trial, you're wrong." She did push back, and she pushed back not on Danny Masterson, not on guilt, definitely on support for the victims. Obviously, in total support. She has spoke out on Danny Masterson prior. They've been going at this since 2017, 18, 19, whatever, from the beginning, from those lawsuits. Okay. Um, they're adversaries, let's just say. But the sheer sight, Sean Hawley chopped up. Judge Almeida was not impressed. She pushed back. No way. She could stay. You don't have a valid reason to kicking her out just because you don't like her and because she talks about Scientology. You know, Judge Olmedo has already ruled that Scientology will be talked about somewhat in this one. Not to the extent that everybody's going to be bashing Scientology for what it is, but to further give explanation to the jury as to why the Jane Does did not want to come forward, and as to why it's been so difficult, and so why they feel they've been harassed and this and that, and why certain things happened. The why of the matter in the time frame and their state of mind is relevant, completely relevant to this case. And it was held back a little bit in the last one. In you know, those of those of us that were kind of leaning towards we understand. If you've checked into Scientology at all, if you watch any of the videos, any of the cult podcasts, if you've seen any of the stuff that we've done on it before, any of the talks I've had with Chris Shelton's channel, Tony Ortega's channel, so many channels out there speaking on it, the coerciveness, the threatening. Okay. If you watched Leah Remini and Mike Render's series, you see the devastation that they cause in people's lives. Okay. That's out there. Nobody can really take that back. And yes, that's prejudicial to Danny Masterson in this case because he is a lifelong Scientologist. He doesn't intend to leave. He is still a Scientologist. Okay. And if you think Scientology doesn't have anything to keep an eye on in this trial, well, then explain to us why they have Scientology lawyers in the galley. There are the assistants of these lawyers and are the lawyers themselves that will appear. You will see many Scientologists in the reporting of Tony Ortega show up. He knows them all. He points them out, just like they point him out. Okay. Just like they point him out. Okay. Now, remember, I told you last time Tony Ortega got into a little bit of trouble by reporting about the grand jury investigation. And he kind of made a joke about it, and he asked all of us to just get ready with bail money and all. I don't think he's trying to be disrespectful. He did. Judge Almeida admonished him, and she gave him a second chance. And I'm glad that he's still in the class, the courtroom. I really am, and I'm sure you are too, because otherwise we're not going to know nothing that's going on in there. Because like we're only going to get dribs and drabs, okay, and some of it's going to be like a little slanted on either side. Well, let's get to the opening statements. Judge Almeida did back up that Leah Remini could stay there. And, I'm sure that most of you actually know. Let me see if I can get this up here. I actually know what Leah Remini looks like. But remember Leah Remini? Okay, and you know the whole big series on A&E on Scientology. It was wonderful. She's been ever since she left Scientology, she's been an advocate for anyone trying to get out, to help people. She's been trying to get the story out. She's been a strong voice, especially the harder they pushed back at her. Remember, Leah's whole family were Scientologists. When she left, she had to leave everything. She knows the story well. Okay. And she's also, the more you push at her, the more she pushes back. She's an East Coaster for sure. She's got that attitude. She definitely, you can't tell her what to do. And I admire that about her. When she supports, she supports. Okay. Exactly. Exactly. Sean, that's a very good question. Why should he get special treatment because of his religion? And I kind of agree with you there. I really do. Because, you know, when I'm thinking about it, when I'm thinking about it, when they say you can't talk about Scientology, well, it's the defense's job to protect their client, right? And so they're actually trying to protect the negativity that the just thinking Scientology seems to convey. And they were well aware of it. They're well aware of the press against them. They're well aware of all the movement against them and the things that are said. And every time you link the two together, it it does look negative to Danny because he is a Scientologist, okay? And remember what we're going to be speaking about here in this trial. Scientology clearly, through their teachings, told all three of the accusers that what happened couldn't happen because under their teachings, it doesn't exist. Under their teachings, it didn't matter what Danny Masterson did to the victims with or without consent. It didn't matter. It didn't exist. Told them it couldn't have happened because it was their responsibility to do whatever he wanted. Yes, I just said that. You're going to hear testimony. You're going to hear testimony that that's what they were re-educated with after they reported to Scientology, that they had to go through ethics to learn their place, that they were under Danny, and if that this couldn't have happened if they just didn't say no. If they just were compliant, they wouldn't be upset. I know I'm saying that kind of calm, right? But I'm not. And I'm sure you're not either when you hear that. Okay, because that doesn't sound like Fry's consent to me. That doesn't sound like 2023 to me. Hmm. That sounds like treating people like they're less than. Doesn't sound like equality. Sounds like a bunch of other bullshit we put off with other kind of organizations, okay? Well, Scientology should get called out about it. And I'm glad this trial is going to do it because they do get to talk about it, okay? And I'm hoping that someone will pick up on this trial and do something about the legal way that we term consent, especially when it comes to partners and especially when it comes to sleep violations or unconscious violations. We need stricter. We need stricter parameters in that way on where to go legally for that. One of my interests in this case, how it started, was because of that. And I've linked an article on sleep assault down below that I found quite Quite interesting. Thank you, Sean. I've been doing better because, this is the real world. And, although I am a bear that happily wears her rose colored glasses, I always speak on the world I want to exist. But have no doubt, I'm grounded in reality. I know the world we live in. Okay. I just choose to try to frame it a different way occasionally. And I'm doing my best to keep my cool with this one. um it won't do any good to soapbox things. What it does is to get the information out there is going to help more. Get the information out there on what the issues are with this case. So let's go back now to the opening statements again with Mueller talked about what the talked directly to the jury. Okay, but before he did, okay, the one thing that Judge Almeida did, okay, that was quite impressive to me, is when she when she spoke to the jury. When she spoke to the jury, she tried to remind them that reasonable doubt means that the evidence that you're hearing is completely believable. She didn't say that it proves beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed a crime. She's clearly laying out the foundation. If you believe what they're saying, then you don't have reasonable doubt. She kind of reclarified that because if you'll remember, there in the first trial, Cohen made a big deal out of that in regards to no physical evidence, this and that. There's not going to be. These assault charges are years old. How could there be? Okay. They didn't report, and that's why Scientology is such a big part of it, is they are the reason they didn't report it. Okay. So if they didn't report it, then no kits were taken. There's no physical evidence. The process wasn't stopped, you know. So another thing that I forgot to mention is that there was an attorney with Leah Remini. Okay. Anyway, Miss Headley had mentioned, Claire Headley had mentioned Leah in her report. And so they may want to call her as a cross, but they could call her as an impeachment witness, like I said, Judge Olmedo said. But she didn't get removed. Okay. Um, Judge Olmedo clearly was trying to define to the jury about how opening statements will be provided by the prosecution, but that the defense isn't required to, that the evidence is required to be put forward by the prosecution, but the defense doesn't really need to offer any. And the same thing with closing statements. Okay. Um, she kind of laid out everything in regards to what they would and would not be looking to. And that, of course, like always, they can believe part, whole, or none of anyone's testimony. Okay. But that they should not judge Danny based on the fact that he was arrested or charged, that he deserves a fair shake, and they have to go by what is presented. Okay. And the jury seemed all reports on the jury at this time seem to be that they're really paying close attention to everyone speaking, especially Judge Almedo. When she speaks, they all eyes turn around, they're staring dead in her face. Okay. All right. So she turns it over to DA Mueller and he goes on, good morning, and talks about what he's going to present, the evidence that they're going to see. He then starts the whole history of each Jane Doe's testimony from the year that they met Danny through the assaults and etc. In a little shorter version, but it was graphic, and he did go through it. Okay, he did that, and I'm not going to repeat everything he said on every Jane Doe. Okay, he then also spoke after giving the history of how we got here. Okay, in regards to the Jane Doe's testimonies, he he then went on. Um, He then went on to speak in regards to the expert witnesses, um, that that they'll be hearing from. Okay. Um, and at that point, um, he gets to that point. It's already after lunch, or after break actually, and Tony Ortega made a reference to an actress who had appeared in the galley, Jessica Barth. She's from Ted, the movie, but she currently runs a nonprofit. Um, and I don't recall the name of it, but I will get it for you and I'll link it. But it actually provides solutions to gender based issues on equality and safety in the entertainment industry, Hollywood. Okay. And she's sitting with the victim side. She's there in support of the victims. And I thought that that was great and deserved mention. So when I do get that nonprofit in the name, I will link it down for you all to check out. Hi, Andrew. Thanks for joining us. Mm. What's the thing on Danny's neck in the thumbnail? Hmm. Hold on. Let me see what you're speaking of. Oh, they look to be his headphones. Like, they look to be some kind of microphone. I'm not sure, actually. This is from one of the pre-trial hearings, when we were still masking up occasionally. This is before the first trial started. Okay. Um, I didn't want to use any pictures. Actually, Mocking Media helps me with thumbnails for the Masterson trial. And basically, his explanation for using this picture, was number one, the quality of the picture on when it all began after he first got arrested. Because if we remember how he looked at the end of the trial, he was looking a little ragged at the end of the first trial. And then when I saw the first picture of him for the retrial, well, he looked quite smug, and there was no way I was putting that. Like, there's no way we were putting that on the thumbnail. Okay. This is serious. Okay. And this was one of the only pictures that we saw from the whole trial and before, to where it looks like Danny Masterson is actually taking things a little seriously. Okay. Let me put up what she's talking about if anybody else can tell us what this is. Okay. All right. Do you see that around his neck there? That's what you're asking about, right? To me, it looks like some kind of microphone that might go with some kind of fancy headphones. I'm not sure. Um, is it a microphone for the court so that they could hear what he said? I'm not sure. I'm not sure at all. Mm. Hey, Beck. Thanks for joining. Hey, Charlie, I saw you come in. Now I can see the message. I'm glad I could see it. So there's no problem with that account. Cool. Hope you're doing good, Charles. Wrecker, I just saw yours too. Thanks for the otters and the strawberries. Don't forget to feed those otters, people. We don't want them running amok in the chat, especially if Milky shows up. Anyway. Anyway, so that I could leave that up for a while. If anybody could tell me what that is, I think it's some kind of microphone for the court to hear him, or something related to his headset. I don't think he'd be wearing his headphones into the court like that. It does look like he's taking this seriously at this time, you know. But you know, I digress. But I don't know, Aunt Jared. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that because I have no idea. But very good question. Okay. Um, back to the opening statements. We go through all of the testimony of the women, and then he's taught, and then of course Mueller's going to have to bring up his expert witnesses. Okay. Um, he actually will start to talk about he's got Jennifer Ferenz, a medical doctor. He's got three expert witnesses: Jennifer Ferenz, a criminologist that talks about, and he also has Barbara Zeev. Remember, she was the one who was going to speak in regards to how memory works, and trauma, with trauma and assault victims, specifically assault victims. She's more of an expert. Barbara Ziv is actually a forensic psychologist, um and she's going to talk about what he calls counterintuitive victim behaviors. And so he's talking to the jury about that, that a victim can have conceptual sense after something happens, and that it is not uncommon when in a relationship and something like this happens, especially with the circumstances surrounding it and what the teachings were and how they tried to wrestle with it with Scientology teachings and with the relationship themselves, as to why some of their behaviors may seem odd to the jury. Like when we all heard about it and we heard that several of them saw him again or didn't leave immediately or continued their relationship. That needs to be explained because you or I may not understand, nor would a jury member understand why someone would put themselves in that position. And she's there to help explain uh kind of victim mentality, like how they may have been feeling given the situations and how it is actually common for it to arise. If you're not in that kind of situation, you would not understand it. So I think it's good that they bringing those witnesses forward. The LAPD toxicologist is not there to testify about any drugs being found in any of the women's systems. But he is there to talk about how that process with these types of assaults happens, what kind of symptoms they report, whether or not this is like the norm of what he's seen in his line of duty as someone who deals with these kind of cases on a regular basis, which is also very good information for the jury because they didn't get that last time. They just heard the testimony of how they all felt and everything, but not a very good explanation on why that could be. Now, no one is saying that that's what he did. They're not going to accuse him of that straight out, he being Danny Masterson, because they don't have evidence to back that up, and they're smart enough not to bring it and make it a bone of contention. Okay. It would be unfair. And I agree. It would be absolutely unfair to accuse him of that right now with not a shred of evidence except for how they felt. Okay. But this other evidence, as far as how they felt, is the way many victims of this type of assault have reported it the same way. And that's valuable. Okay. Well, they agreed not to be, because they're not charging Danny with it, not to accuse. And that's fair. If you're not charging him, don't accuse. Okay. So, um, they're also going to talk about Barbara Ziva as the expert is going to get on the stand and actually talk about how you may have difficulty assigning a name to what happened. That it is not instinctual that you would automatically think that that is what happened to you, especially with the teachings, especially because they were in a relationship, especially because of how it happened and all of the symptoms before, that there would be doubt. And so they won't most likely automatically feel that a violation had immediately occurred. Um, it's not something your brain wants to go to automatically. And she's going to explain that process, which I thought was good. And I can't wait for that testimony. Actually, I'm actually looking forward to that to see how she explains that to the jury. Okay. Um, he then goes on and tells them about Claire Headley and why she will be there, that she's a former member of Scientology. She's quite high up in the ranks, as we all know, and that she's going to testify clearly to Scientology practices and principles that led to the belief that they couldn't report, that led to the belief that it was them, not Danny, that did something wrong. Okay. She's there to give that information, and he clearly identifies that to the jury. Okay. He also tells them that he knows that there was a lot of information and all the details that he gave in regards to the occurrences from Jane Doe 1, 2, and 3. And also from the fourth woman who will be testifying, who is named by her first name, Kathy J. Okay. Um, mm, so Godless Granny. I meant high up in office ranks as far as Scientology. I don't believe that she was actually high. Well, she is very high in Scientology ranks. Yeah. Very funny. You're throwing me off my game here, Granny. Stop. Okay. Um, he actually asked the jury when these experts testify to please pay really close attention to what they say about drugs and about common behaviors of victims after a traumatic incident, and pay close attention to actually what the principles in the Church of Scientology were and why the women took so long. Okay. The four women that will testify, he states, it's not easy for them to be in court today. That he's assured they'd rather be doing anything else besides what they're doing. Um, you're going to hear about what they went through when they went to the church, about the limitations that were put upon them, and then about the law enforcement and investigations that followed, and some of the problems that happened there. Okay. You're going to see what a long process it was to actually get to where they are today, here at a second trial. Okay. But he did say at the end that he was confident that after they listened to everything, that they would actually bring about a guilty verdict on all three of the counts against defendant Danny Masterson for forcible rape of Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 2, and Jane Doe 3. And he thanked them. Okay. And Judge Olmedo, you know, sent the jury out, you know, let at that time for a few minutes to give Philip Cohen, who will be the defense, okay, um, will be giving the opening statements for the defense, and not Sean Hawley. Okay. And if you've been following on the socials, you'll see that there's a lot of speculation on whether Sean Hawley is first chair or Philip Cohen is first chair. Well, basically, right now, I think Olmedo's talking to whoever is actually leading with witnesses or statements or anything like that, or whoever brings up what it is. She had asked them to come forward with who would be the one she goes to first, and I never saw where they actually gave her a direct answer. Okay. Um, but I could miss a word here and there. So if anybody has anything on that, my ears are open. Mhm. All righty. So defense attorney Philip Cohen comes out of the box a little hot. hmm He says that he promised you during juries. He said he tells the jury straight out, I promised you during your selection that you're going to hear an opening from Mueller that was very horrible. And you promised me that you would make up your mind, you would not make up your minds before hearing anything. And I'm counting on you to live up to your promise today. In other words, he's acknowledging how horrible what happened to them was. It was horrible. No denying it. There's no defense on it. Okay. He says that in an opening statement, and I quote, a lawyer should say, in good faith, here's what the evidence is going to say. I had a presentation planned, but after hearing what Mueller said, and of course, Mueller objects. Okay. So he starts again. We're talking about three people in the case. And this is where I have a problem. And so did Tony Ortega, because when he reported it, he put Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 2, and Jane Doe 3. Philip Cohen addressed them by their first names. The reason I'm putting them in that order, those are the charges in the case. Judge Almedo says the court will admonish everyone not to refer to Jane Doe 2 by her first name. So she just came right out and told him, stop right there. Okay. So he carries on and he goes, well, you heard in the opening statement that Jane Doe 1 is going to testify that the gun was really not a big deal. Again, he's focusing on the gun. Do you remember this? Okay. And that's why she didn't mention it to anyone. And of course, Mueller then objects again. Okay. Now, there wasn't a lot of objections going on during Mueller's, I will admit. There was not a lot of objections noted. There were when they were talking about what happened the actual events that are charged, the actual incidents. There were some objections in there, but this one's like coming out right out of the gate. Okay. So she's going to tell you that the gun was a minute detail and that it was never used in any way. And she's going to tell you he never used that gun and that he never threatened her with it. He then starts to actually put up a slide of what Jane Doe said at one interview and what she said during testimony in the first trial. Now, here's where Judge Olmedo starts to have a big problem because she just says any prior statements that are coming as evidence at this point stick to what the evidence will show. You're not allowed to talk about quotes from the prior evidence. Okay. And he carries on, you know, about this and Jane Doe wanting the gun, and again, he starts talking about other testimony of J. Doe 1 and inconsistencies. He then says that brings up Detective Schlagel about that Detective Schlagel now remembers because he's been refreshed by his own reports and that he will remember things that are something and that he does remember Jane Doe 1 talking to him and that about being a really good cop and writing good reports and paying attention. Okay. Um, so he's going on and he's actually talking about the testimony on and on from trial 1. Okay. Mm. He goes and he brings in, you know, they go in and he says that he doesn't understand and the jury shouldn't understand why things weren't reported because he states that he wants to be very clear about one thing. And he says, a woman can report a rape at any time. 2 hours later, 2 days, 2 years. Got objected to by Mueller and was sustained by Judge Olmedo. Now he's actually going into, he says, what you're going to hear is what they did report was consistent. And he's trying to say that they were coerced, that they coordinated again. He's trying to put that right there, right out of the gate. That was one of the things that they used in the first trial. They tried to say repeatedly that the women were telling the same story, that they coordinated everything. That's one of the things you're going to see different in this trial. Okay. Anyway, he goes on with these inconsistencies, which I'm going to stop repeating each one. I'm going to actually link you the article for this so that you can see um what Cohen was doing here because I'm going to get frustrated if I just keep pointing to every little damn thing he did. Okay. But Tony Ortega, he also has a video on YouTube on his YouTube channel where if you can't access the Substack readings through here, you can definitely see his YouTube video on it. He does little reports. They're like 16, 17 minutes long, at least one a day. And then he does talk about it more also on longer ones. Okay. Um, Judge Almeida, now, just then, okay. All right. When he gets to the point where he starts talking about how Reyes told one of the Jane Does not to talk to the other witnesses, but she went ahead and did it anyway, and that clearly shows that they were being coercive, Judge Almeida sent the jury out of the room. She said, enough. That's it. She said, take those slides down. And she said to Mr. Cohen, do not use quotes again. Do not read in any prior testimony from the other trial. This is a new trial. The evidence comes in this trial, not what was presented before. If Detective Reyes testifies to the same thing, there is no need to quote her from the last trial. Detective Reyes is on the witness list. You don't bring it in like that. Okay. And then she said, to Mueller that his opening bordered on an argument. In other words, he was actually doing a closing argument with all of the evidence in his opening, although it was borderline. He did go into detail about everything, a little much. She tells him that she had given him some leeway, and she seems a little unhappy that he's objecting so much to what Philip Cohen is saying, but she understands, but still. And now she's dressing down Cohen again about quoting prior testimony and also for using first names. Okay. And Cohen says the slides that he presented are from the first trial. And she says, well, if that were true, they wouldn't have quotes from the first trial on it. She just slapped him back like immediately. He said, hold on, to the judge. And she said, don't ever tell me to hold on. And then she went on, per Tony Ortega's reporting, to say that he didn't use quotes she goes on to emphasize that he not use quotes from the first trial at all. Okay. She says it's a new trial. And then she does this. She puts it out there in a really good euphemism here. She says it's like a double header in baseball. What happened in that first game has little influence except for how you handicap what you do the seventh time around. In other words, you learned what to do or not do in the first trial, but you don't get to actually bring in the first trial like that. And so he just pushes back and asks her how he should be referring to things. And she just told him not to talk about things from the first trial, but to actually stick to what they'll be presenting in the evidence in this trial. And don't use past quotes of witnesses from the other trial. So, they were both a little heated, but Tony Ortega reported not as heated as he has seen them prior in the past, and they all calmed down pretty quickly. She brought the jury back. She tells him, she tells Cohen that he can refer to things as he wants, but he has to do it with the evidence that is this trial now, okay, and not use things that were said last time, period. Okay, so she brings the jury back in and she kind of lets him finish. Okay. He goes on to say that the Jane Does kept talking, their problems with Detective Reyes, her problems with their testimony. Also brings up the picture, talks about okay, here's one thing I noticed, and you will too if you get to read the Substack, if you read this article. When Philip Cohen refers to the women having prior relations or being in a relationship with Danny Masterson, he doesn't refer to it as a relationship or relations. He says sex. He says they first had sex and then they had sex again. Like, I thought that he was intentionally trying to be a little derogative there. Like, it kind of offended me. I don't know about you guys, but I thought it was unnecessary. He also then talks about whether they were drinking, whether they went to a bar, lifestyles. Like, he's bordering on a problem here with 402 testimony, as far as I think. I mean, you're not supposed to go out to prior acts with a victim at all, but because the prior acts he's referring to happen to be the defending, it's allowed. Okay, but he does have to be careful in how he's framing it, and he's really, to me, pushing it to the edge here a little bit. He talks about the women having a civil lawsuit against Scientology, naming Danny Masterson and David Miscavige, okay, in regards to the harassment that they received since they tried to report. Jane Doe 3 started to report in 2016. Okay, they've been harassed. They talk about all the NDA that Jane Doe 1 had. Why would she accept money for this, that, or the other thing, and then come about and do all of this later? Okay, in clear violation. Okay, trying to infer that the women, of course, they're all in this for the money. Okay, I don't understand how 5 women, because remember, Ms. Vesey testified in the first trial, why these women would come forward with this horrendous stories all over again, have their character besmirched, be called liars, be called manipulators, be called money grubbers, and just jilted lovers on occasion. Why put yourself through all of that? Especially Jane Doe 3, which has some of the most horrifying stories there. Um, and actually is now married with children and moving on. And talks about the process of how she found out that she was actually violated. Because all along she was believing. Remember, Jane Doe 3 became a Scientologist for Danny Masterson and took it seriously. She was dedicated. They had her convinced that she was the one that did something wrong, that it wouldn't have happened. It would not have happened if she'd been doing the right thing. And that belief wa- was carried forward and brought out by D.A. Mueller when she took the stand after opening statements. The rest of Philip Cohen's opening statement was pretty much as you would expect. He points out inconsistencies, he points out disparagingly things about their character and so on that he can. And he talks about how Detective Reyes didn't found in discrepancies and didn't find uh, didn't try to say that Detective Reyes wasn't an issue in the investigation when clearly in the first trial it did come out that she was. All three women do believe that they were mishandled by her. And they all three developed a great distrust for reporting through that particular agency at the LA Police Department that she was actually conducting the investigation for. And they said it was basically from her interactions with her. Um, he pushes back a bit on that. Um, he also wants to make sure that it's the people versus Masterson and not the people versus Scientology, and that they can't really focus that much on Scientology. He also brings up the fact that Claire Headley sued Scientology, that everybody involved in this case is suing Scientology, and that they're all motivated against Scientology, and it kind of inferring that Danny Masterson is some kind of scapegoat for the bigger picture. Um, and that found that to be absolutely horrendous. You know, I think to actually say like that women would use something that happened to them like this as part of a bigger scheme, like only against Scientology and not actually be looking for personal justice to what actually happened to them, to try to right it in themselves, the violation that occurred, to try to get their power back on such a demeaning act. And that was the point where, as calm as I am right now, reading that, I did want to get out my Jersey bat. Yes, I did. But I digress. Um, that kind of language coming from Philip Cohen, I've learned to expect. It's what he did through the whole first trial. He's doing his best for Danny Masterson, but to just take that all away from them like that, it's absolutely ludicrous. Um, and it kind of shows where they're coming from. They're going to do anything to tear down the statements of the victims. That's kind of the way it goes in court. Um, they have a right to defend themselves. I get that. And I'm all for it, actually. But mm, I'm just uh I'm just kind of shocked that he does it so well and he doesn't mind looking like such an ass as he does it. He really is showing a little bit of desperation there, if that's what they gotta tear down. Um, I would use it too. I mean, if they're going to make Scientology a big thing, I'd be saying, well, maybe Scientology is okay. But he brings up a lot of the drinking and carrying on and things like that. Um, the judges, it took a while to finish. They called for an afternoon break. He finishes up in the afternoon. And we hear from, as I said, the first witness in this trial, and it's still going on. As a matter of fact, when I went live today, they were still in trial and they were still on the cross examination of Jane Doe 3. Okay. Now we all know Jane Doe 3's name. She put it out there. We don't refer to it in the trial, and I won't live here on YouTube. Okay. But her name is out there and we just don't use it, and I'm going to honor that based on the court actually saying they're not using it during the trial. So I won't print it all here, but she was the first witness and went through step by step with DA Mueller, who did the direct examination, uh, how she met Danny. They went through the whole courtship, everything, and up to when it turned bad, what they say bad when the first incident occurred, and her whole process through the relationship, what she was thinking, how she went through Scientology to find to get answers, how she did the ethics program and all, how the final decision to leave him after the last attack was that he would not go to ethics. He said he didn't need it. He was just fine. She kept wanting him to just get better. She admitted to loving him, to trying to fix it, to thinking it was part of the teachings that made him treat her this way and that they had to work it out together. So she talks about the whole process of having to break up through Scientology to where they had to actually go back to Scoggins, who was their head person or whatever at the time. Remember, she reported to Miranda Scoggins and her husband at the time the event happened. That's who she reported to. That's who she got her teachings and her ethics from. She went through the program to retell her because Scoggins had told her it wouldn't have happened if she just did what she was supposed to, that she shouldn't say no to Danny, that it is her duty as his person to provide sex whenever he wanted it, however he wanted it. You shouldn't say no. You can't just be tired from modeling or from traveling or anything else. You have to just do it. Because remember, she was a model. She had a career. Well, she stopped a lot of that to be a Scientologist with Danny Masterson. Okay. Uh, she admits freely that she loved him at the time. Okay. And that it was a hard breakup and it wasn't settled. Okay. She knew she had to leave, she says, because he wouldn't get help. And she was starting to think that the things that were happening to her were not right. I mean, she felt it from the start that they weren't right. Well, she was trying to wrestle this and her teachings through Scientology and her relationship with Danny. He did a good job of laying that out quite compassionately. All the gory details, also, okay, and then the process of how she got to report, okay, that it wasn't till quite some time later that she reported it. It was in 2016, and she reported it. And that the reason that she reported it is that she called an organization, RAIN, and she asked them about what happened to her and if it would be assault. And they told her straight out that that was rape and that she had been violated when she was explained. So she had been talking to her husband about it, and he said that was a violation. You were raped. But she didn't believe it until then. It never occurred to her because they told her it didn't exist. Scientology told her that word does not exist because it can't happen if you're in a relationship with a Scientologist who's above you, you know. And Danny Masterson thought that he was just fine. He was living his life. He was doing well. He was achieving things. He had no reason for ethics. It didn't matter how he treated her. There was nothing anybody was going to do about it. They went through that process that they talked about how she reported it. They talked about the long process it took, who she talked to. And then they went into great detail about how she found out about the other Jane Does. And that's quite compelling because it's not the sinister story that Philip Cohen tried to put out there that they're all coercing and everything. And that how in the beginning she didn't talk to anybody else about anything, okay? But that she did hear that there were others through other people and that she did talk to them. But the one thing they never talked about was the incidents, except for the fact that they too were assaulted. They never talked to each other about the details of that, just about the pressure that Scientology had them under. They did talk about the harassment, they did talk about the fear. Okay. What you have to remember, one thing that came crystal clear to me in the testimony of Jane Doe 3 is that the reason that she spoke to the other victims is because she believed it when Scientology told her that she brought this assault upon herself, and she now felt responsible that others were attacked because she didn't report. because she didn't come forward, because she didn't do enough when it happened, because she believed them. Because at this point, she feels completely violated by what Scientology has taught her. She feels she was manipulated. She feels she was abused mentally. Okay. She feels she feels like a true victim of them. And she feels responsible that anyone else got attacked. So every time she heard about one, she reached out. She wanted to support. She says she feels responsible. And when I read that, that broke my heart because not only was she violated against her will, and she has to deal with being treated less than, dehumanized by someone she loves all this time. Now she's carrying the burden of feeling responsible for what happened to other people because she didn't do enough. This does not sound to me like someone out for revenge. This doesn't sound like someone who could manipulate or actually conspire to do all of this against use Danny Masterson to get back at Scientology. This just sounds to me like a person with a big heart, a broken, hurt heart, who just cared about what happened to the others. That was a turning point for me because I don't recall that part in the first trial. If it was there, it's something I gleaned over and it didn't strike me as much as it did this time. But actually hearing how she went with each one and she found out about the others through other people. They didn't like reach out to each other, just put out a big ad and ask for people. Okay. It came through just talking with other people about stuff. Okay. Well, she did make it public when she accused him publicly out and said that she was going to, based on the harassment, when the harassment got so bad that her family was threatened. And if you recall, part of the civil suit started because of things that happened to Jane Doe 3 in regards to harassment from people representing Scientology, in regards to her dog, threatening her children, threatening her husband, harassing constantly. She had had enough. She started speaking out. She started pushing back. Okay. And it got worse. Okay. Well, because her name got out there, then people started to find her. Okay. And they could all go forward. When she went to Detective Reyes, she had the names of Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2, and she had already spoke to them and said, "Can I give them your information?" So that, like, and she said, and they said yes, they were all in agreement. But that's not coercion. Okay. That's just, hey, there are other victims and here are their names. Okay. And from that point, it became quite clear on how things were going to be handled there in with the LAPD. Now, I'm not going to disparage a whole police department, but I will say there were quite a few things that were done by Detective Reyes that I don't exactly find to be the best in police work in regards to the caring of victims. I will say that things have changed in how we handle victim statements and how victims are treated with more dignity, and that a lot of legislation had to be passed to do that. Mhm. But there are plenty of ball dropping that gets done, plenty of mistakes. Jane Doe 3 then gave testimony on how Detective Reyes was wanting her to not talk to any of the other Jane Does, but then wanted her to record conversations with other people and things like that. And then at one point wanted to give Jane Doe a number that she should be reporting and talking to someone. Um, and yet when they pulled it up, instead of being a blind number that nobody would know, it came up LAPD. So anybody who had searched it would know, and they would have been outed immediately. They became very distrustful, and I don't blame them. Whether that was an accident or something intentional, you never know. But so many little things like this that occurred, it's hard to believe that they were all accidents. It's just I don't want to believe that anybody's that sloppy you know um what you're not going to hear in the testimony is anything about DNA or anything like that. Another point that Cohen brought up, um it talks of, we know there's not going to be any. There was no exams, there were no immediate interviews, and we're going to hear why. And we start to get to that when Jane Doe talks about the incidences and talks about the ethics program she went through, everything that Scientology. She talks about her conversations with Miranda Scoggins. She talks about how she went with Chris Scoggins and what he told her and how she tried to wrestle that in her mind. Okay. When it gets to the point with going over all of the testimony in regards to the police reporting and all, it's she's much calmer this time. Oh, you remember in the first trial we had reported that she had to stop. Um, uh, but I definitely, uh, the testimony seems calmer, more precise. Um, After all, it's the second time around. It's got to be. Uh, anyway. Hmm. What's with my lips, Sean? Wait a minute. Oh wait. Oh. Oh my, Ox. Okay, I'm glad you're having a good time. What? I'm glad I didn't use the other avatar where they actually move. Okay. Oh, Voices in Action is the name. Okay, thank you, Always Grateful. And I'm sorry to like jump off the testimony here like that, but that's important. Jessica Barth, the organizations we talked to you about in the beginning was Voices in Action. Um, I appreciate that and thank you. Thank you for dropping that again so that I saw it. Well, in regards to Jane Doe 3, I'm not going to get actually to the defense's cross examination today, except for the fact that I will tell you they do talk about it is actually going to be Sean Hawley, which we talked about that in the first one I did, the update last week, just to get you ready for everything in the jury selection, get you ready for the testimony, and do a refresher. There was reporting out there that she wouldn't be going against the the accusers or the victims. She would not be the direct. She would not. I mean, the cross examination. Sorry for the defense. Uh, what she is. She went and cross examined. She Jane Doe 3 directly herself, and we'll be reporting that in the next update. And I think on that, I'm going to do my best here to get over to the chat and see what kind of questions you guys have and do my best to answer what I can. And I do appreciate that. Let's see, I'm going to put this up so I don't forget. Yep. Oh, there's another actress, Caitlin Delaney. Okay, they started Voices in Action. Thank you. After the Weinstein, yeah, that was another horrible one. Yeah, and I'm glad that they're helping people in that industry because it's a troublesome one, for sure. Oh boy. Okay, now I see what's going on. Hey, Shill, it's nice to see you. Hey, Ox, it's good to see you too. Ox, I'm just glad I'm not using my automated avatar. Hmm. All right. Well, if you guys don't have any questions, I'm going to wrap up with Jane Doe 3 just saying that the testimony was actually with the pace of D.A. Mueller, who was the one actually asking all the questions on direct. It was much more even, it was much more precise, and it clearly addressed where some of the focus was put by the defense in the last trial in regards to inconsistencies of statements or collusion going on or how the reporting got done. It was really precise in laying out how that process actually happened, why it took so long, actual repeating again the chain of events that led Jane Doe 3 to believe, yes, she had been actually violated. Now, she was always unsettled by what happened in her relationship with Danny Masterson, and she clearly testifies to that, and the breakup. and how they actually got back together for once or even twice that they met afterwards. That she freely admitted she loved him, and this was an unsettled relationship ending for her because it wasn't satisfactory that he would not go through ethics to change how he was treating her. One of the other things that they brought up was how it wasn't just physical, how he often demeaned her in certain ways, which also led to her belief that he needed the ethics training. Okay. And don't forget, she is the one who witnessed the episode with Jennifer Epstein or Esposito, the actress, who he berated while they were working together on a project. They all went out to dinner, and he is like catcalling her and horrifically berating her while she's with either her boyfriend or her husband, um, and while holding hands with Jane Doe walking down the street, and how that whole event took place. They go into great detail about that and how it made her feel, how she started questioning the way Danny treats women in general. Um, and herself the demeaning way. It wasn't just, they went through the whole relationship because remember, she was with him for a long time, 6 years, I think. Yeah. Mm, You know, but anyway, there's excellent articles, always is saying for the group that Jessica Barth and Kathleen Delaney has said. Um, and I'm glad that they are continuing, and I'm glad they're there to support the victims in the trial. I think that's a wonderful gesture. Answer the trial is not being live streamed anyway. LA will not allow audio or video in the room. In LA, this is the Los Angeles court. Same thing's going to happen with Manson or anything that. All we get is the reporting that comes out. There's no live streams or anything that come out of there. It's just how it's done there. Yeah, I could. mm, I'm telling you, this one's not an easy one, but there's some differences in this trial. This retrial, this clearly they learned from the questioning of the jury afterwards, from going back over the testimonies that were done. And I'd have to say the pace and the way that Mueller handled all the direct with Jane Doe 3 over the last 2 days. Okay, because I mean, I don't envy that she had to be on that trial, the stand, this long. But it took that long to get all of these points of reference that seemed to be needed to be addressed a little bit more fully, little more clarity to the situation, more detail into how things happened. And I think he did it much a very improved job, I will say that. He didn't glean over anything. They really focused on why the women felt the way they were, or why Jane Doe in particular, because she's the one on the stand, felt the way that she felt about not being able to not be able to report, having conflict, the whole process of how she got to where she was. It was in great detail. Um, Better understanding for the jury. It's more like everything is geared towards someone that knows nothing about it, understanding where they were coming from. It's like they took a step back. They it's like they removed all the assumptions, you know, and they're making sure that the points they want to make are clear. Okay. And I appreciated that. And I hope you will too. So, like I said, don't forget to check out Tony Ortega, his channel, and his Substack, the Underground Bunker. I did list the one that I'm speaking on today in the chat for the opening statements in particular. And we're going to continue then with the defense's cross of Jane Doe 3 on our next update, which will be at the end of the week or in the beginning of next week again. It depends on what happens. If there's a lot, I'll have to do one again at the end of the week. Um, uh, without any more questions, I think I'm going to wrap it up. Oh, wait, I think I see a question. Hold on one sec. Oh, I do have a question here. I have a question. Why does your avatar have cat's ears and not bear ears? Or are you really a cool cat? Well, I don't call myself cool, but thank you. They're not bear ears, but bear's my nickname. It has nothing to do with the cat ears. The cat ears is because when I started my channel 2 years ago, Okay. It was, I was actually making, fun of Death Noodles at the time because he wear those little white ears all the time, and I thought that he was being quite the contrarian and kind of like mixed mingling and all of that, and it was just my little, dig, actually, and then I liked it. And I still like it. And I have to admit that I wear them as a headband occasionally myself at home in real life, not just on YouTube. And I branded the avatar and I don't want to change it. They're going to stay, you know. And that's that, crazy cat. But if you want to consider me one of the cool ones with you, that's cool, because you're kind of a cool cat. But I don't know. I wouldn't call myself cool because isn't it kind of uncool to call yourself cool? Like, really? So, anyway, but anyway, Bear's just the nickname. It has nothing to do with ears or tails or that I'm covered in fur or anything like that. Truth be told, it's a nickname from my nan. Long story, but it gave me comfort. And YouTube's a scary place. So I used it to make myself feel a little more secure out here, knowing that every time I said it, it would remind me of my nan, who loved me very much no matter what I did. So there you go. That's too much information for one stream. So I'm out of here now that I'm all embarrassed. I'm just going to give one more quick check and see if you have a good question in here. If like, I am very glad also, Aunt Chair, that they're including experts on trauma to dispel those myths because people wouldn't automatically understand this unless you've been through it or someone who could speak educated on it. Really, I'm very pleased about that. I thought Mindy Mechanic did a good job in the first trial. I really did, as far as the gaps in memory, but there's much more to it. There's so much more to it, and I'm hoping that that testimony is going to be uh, do a great job in helping the jury understand where the victims are coming from. Okay. Yes, answer. It was a mistrial because the jury could not come to an actual unanimous decision of guilty or non guilty. They said they were deadlocked. There was nothing they could do about it. And if you go back to the reporting from the last trial, you'll find out at the end that I do disclose some shenanigans by the jury leader, the head of the jury foreman. That's it, not leader, foreman. Uh, there was a whole big to do about it. Um, it all seemed quite sketch to me, but I'd rather have a mistrial. They then tried to get everything thrown out, and of course, Judge Olmedo said, "Nope, there's definitely enough here to go forward with another trial," and we are, because the jury gets to actually see on these. Uh, Defense had filed a motion that since there was a mistrial, that no reasonable jury could ever come to a conclusion. Well, Judge Olmedo believed that he can't speak for everybody out there, and that yes, it was a good possibility that 12 jurors could come to a conclusion of either guilty or not guilty. And we hope that either way, we don't get a mistrial this way. We hope either way that Philip Cohen doesn't actually demand a mistrial every time a new witness comes up. He didn't for the first day of trial, which was a little refreshing from last time. Although I will make note that both attorneys were admonished by Judge Almedo from day one. From day one. She's not playing. She's going to be on both of them to keep it straight. She doesn't want a mistrial. She doesn't want everything second guessed. She wants everything up and up, and she runs a tight ship. She's right on schedule. Far as jury selection, boom, 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 done, ready. She said that they would be ready on Monday for testimony, and they were. She's also got a multiple murder case going on. She deals with a lot of gang trials and very violent trials. And she did have to take a couple of breaks, which is why we did have quite a few hours of a gap in the testimony of Jane Doe 3, which is why I could report all the way up to uh, cross 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 examination. But because the cross examination just came out in regards to the reporting of Tony Ortega, like while I was speaking, I didn't feel comfortable enough to speak it all the way through, which is why we'll pick up there on the next one. Oh, but yep, mistrial definitely was. Thanks, everybody. Co- Coffee in a show or dinner wine in a romantic movie? Are you asking me which I prefer? I like both. I have a saying. Like, you really know you're talking to someone worth talking to when they'll actually sit there with you over bad coffee and considers the conversation. So, it's actually my new theory is always make your first date some place you can actually talk where you can make sure it's like you're really dealing with the person, genuine and all. And if you're sitting there drinking bad coffee together and actually having a good conversation, well, dateable. That's all I got to say on that. All right. Thanks, guys. You guys have a great night. And let me just put this on really quick because I forgot again before anybody reminds me. Don't forget to like, share, and comment on the video. If you're not already a YouTube member and or a Patreon member, then you're not in the Discord. Or if you haven't done anything with me contributory wise, like if you want to come talk about something, remember I do more than true crime. I've got my library chats. We got the actual and I am so pleased. I am over the moon. And you might hear it in the lilt of my voice when I say that Charlie Brooker came through as promised in Black Mirror will be back in June, which means we'll be back up here on YouTube doing Black Mirror reviews because you know I am a Charlie Brooker fan and I can't get enough of Black Mirror. Like I did every single episode. Yes, there's a playlist. Go check it out. If you haven't been back there to look, there's quite a few interesting things there, and shame on you. The bear is more than murder. You really need to go look. Okay. On that, I'm done being sassy. I'm out of here. Always, yes, Black Mirror is back. I know my partner in crime down there, Kim, always grateful. I can't wait. But on that, we're done for the evening. Have a good night, everybody.